also a privilege to have us India's G20 and G7. FICCI leadership is Shankar.
Sushma, we can't hear you.
Ma'am, there's a bit of a technical snag. Is it better now?
It's better now.
Much better. Now just go ahead, keep the picture off and just go ahead. Okay.
Sure. FICCI leadership is represented by Mr. Uday Shankar, Senior Vice President FICCI and President of the Walt Disney Company Asia Pacific and Chairman Star and Disney India. We also have with us Dr. Jyotsna Suri, Co-Chair FICCI Former Parliamentarians and past President of FICCI, and our Secretary General, Mr. Dilip Chernoy. A few housekeeping announcements before we begin. We have microphones on mute till invited to speak. Participants are requested to keep videos and mics on mute. Questions to speakers may be posted in the Q&A section of the FICCI Bike platform. We would also like to share that this session is the final one of FICCI Leads in terms of the content and discussion, but then we are immediately going to follow this with a grand finale and a cultural program at 6 p.m. India Standard Time when the session ends. We request all speakers and everyone to stay logged in till at the end of this session to continue with the cultural program. It's our pleasure now to introduce our esteemed guests for today. Ms. Celine Calvis is a member of French Parliament since June 2017. She is currently the whip of the Cultural Affairs and Education Commission and member of the National Assembly's Women's Rights Delegation. She is also president of the France-India Friendship Group. Mr. Dave Sharma is a member of the House of Representatives in the Australian Parliament. Before joining politics, he had an illustrious career as an Australian diplomat, earning the Australian Service Medal for his work in Papua New Guinea. Mr. Christian Herte is a member of the German Bundestag. He has served as a parliamentary state secretary at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, as well as a commissioner for the new federal states and SMEs. He's also chairman for his home district and the state chairman of CDU Thuringia. Mr. Juan Carlos Lozada Vargas is a member of the Colombian Parliament and has led multiple humanitarian service projects. He has devoted his life to voluntary service and leads several socially relevant initiatives. In 2016, he also founded the Citizens Movement for Peace that created the March of the White Flags. We start today's program with a note of welcome by our past president and co-chair of the FICCI Former Parliamentarians Council, Dr. Jyotsna Suri. Dr. Suri is also the CMD of Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. Under her stewardship, the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group has become one of the leading privately owned domestic hotel brands in India. Dr. Suri was conferred with the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Star by the Japan government. She is the first Indian woman to have been awarded this honor since it has commenced for foreign nationals in 1981. May I now invite Dr. Suri for her remarks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Sushma. Esteemed panelists, Shri Anurag, Thakur ji, my colleagues from FICCI, ladies and gentlemen, Namaskar. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to the inaugural edition of Leads 2020. We've created this forum to be an annual exercise connecting us with all our partners worldwide to discuss core issues that impact us. Every nation has three fundamental requirements: growth, employment, and well-being. The COVID pandemic has caused havoc in our lives and has dislodged all three. People and economies across the globe are extremely challenged and are striving to face and overcome this unprecedented situation. The learning is that communities, businesses, and political leaders have to be resilient and adaptable. We also need to respect diversity and ensure sustainability. In fact, we really have to reimagine the world, which is the theme of Leads 2020. Over the past 3 days, we've had 11 power-packed sessions on regions across the world, deliberating on new growth drivers and strategy to meet challenges through partnerships across borders. Today, at this session on multilateralism, we shall try to reimagine a global ecosystem. We are organizing this session under FICCI's Track 2 initiative, the Forum of Parliamentarians. India is the world's largest democracy, and FICCI, as the National Industry Association, believes that and affiliations, and has a healthy mix of political thought processes. We have had several interactions between Indian MPs and their foreign counterparts from countries like US, UK, the European Union, Germany, China, Japan, Singapore, and Israel, and of course, South Asia. As I said earlier, the pandemic has put us on a reset button and on a reset button on our lives and livelihoods. It has forced us to rethink and reimagine the contours of globalization and multilateralism. Self-reliance does not mean inwardness, and globalization does not mean benefit to a few. Multilateralism should be inclusive with smart global governance. We should take advantage of what is best in localization while imbibing best practices and standards globally. We are honored to have eminent speakers from our key partner countries, and we look forward to listening to their global perspective on the changing dynamics of political and socio-economic models. And how do we strengthen our bilateral and multilateral relations in this new normal? May I request Uday Shankarji, who's the Senior Vice President and should be taking over in the month of December, to share a few thoughts with us. Over to you, Uday.
Thank you, Dr. Suri. Thank you very much. A very warm welcome to all of you. First, our Honourable Member of Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Mr. Anurag Thakurji, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, and all the other eminent parliamentarians from all parts of the world. Thank you very much for being here today. We are really privileged and delighted to have you in this session. As Dr. Suri said, LEADS is a tremendous initiative for us, and we've been extremely heartened by the response that it has got. And in the last and final session of LEADS this year, the fact that we are discussing about multilateralism should tell you how important we consider this to be in the world going forward post-pandemic. I would also like to apprise you about LEADS 2020. We call it Reimagine the World. And it has been an amazing 4 days listening to all the speakers. And we believe that this is a great initiative in this time, and we could encourage constructive policy debates, ecologically balanced and prosperous world for our future generations. The unprecedented pandemic has led to drastic developments, not only in our physical lives, but also in our thinking and in our ideas. It is crucial to acclimatize to the new world order and assess how countries can enhance their effectiveness in cultural diplomacy, which is a great avenue for building mutual understanding that in turn leads to tolerance and willingness to cooperate across borders and the multilateral framework. While we have had several economic and financial crises globally in the past, it is prudent to say that the economic and social impact of those crises would have been far worse if not for the extraordinary policy and pragmatic response measures adopted by many governments after multilateral consultations. Coming to today's topic, it might seem that countries are turning inwards and are isolating themselves through concept of self-reliance, but in a broader perspective, nations need to be global as well as local. This crisis has taught that interdependence and self-reliance can go hand in hand with the best of both worlds. I'm pleased to welcome eminent speakers who would share their views on the multitude of facets of globalization, changes in the discourse of multilateralism, and the effectiveness of good global governance in dealing with such crises. With that, I conclude my statement, and once again, welcome all of you, and I look forward to an engaging and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you there. Ladies and gentlemen, with great pleasure, I invite our keynote speaker, Sri Anurag Thakur, Honourable Minister of State for Finance and Corporate Affairs, Government of India. Sri Thakur has been elected to the Parliament 4 times and became the youngest whip of Lok Sabha for his party in 2019. He has won Best Young Parliamentarian Award, Young Global Leader by WEF. He is committed to socio-economic development and well-being of all. And as a youth leader, he has inspired young minds. We are privileged to have him with us today. Sri Anurag Thakur, we would like to hear from you, your perspective on the various aspects of the global ecosystem in line with our Honourable Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Over to you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Jyotsna ji. Former Union Minister and Indian Sherpa to G20 and G7, and my senior colleague in the Parliament, Shri Suresh Prabhu ji. My friend from German Bundestag, Mr. Christian Harte, Mr. Dev Sharma, Ms. Celine Calvis, Baroness Prasher, Juan Carlos from Honourable MP from Colombia, Shri Uday Shankar ji, and former FICCI President, Dr. Jyotsna Suri ji, Vikram Chandra ji, and Dilip Shenoy ji, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening to you and very good morning and good afternoon to many. Namaskar, it gives me immense pleasure to delivering the keynote address at FICCI Leads 2020. All the esteemed guests, business and political leaders present today are leaders in their own right. And I have had a lot of experience in dealing with the problems, what we can all agree, that none of us ever thought we will have to deal with a global pandemic in the form of COVID-19. At least I have never imagined that we'll go through this phase. Every country across the world has been affected by the COVID-19 in different proportions. Every crisis needs a timely and adequate response that is possible only under a strong, able, and decisive leader. The crisis can be in a company, in a startup, or in a nation. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit India, Prime Minister Modi addressed to the nation was befitting of a leader of his stature, and his calm and composed personality reassured the people across the country. At the same time, PM's addresses and his leadership skills showed that our citizens remained united. Domestically, with all our resource constraints and population pressure. And population pressure, when I say, you can well imagine 1.38 billion people. Our phased response in scaling up our policies without causing unnecessary panic has ensured that the people have largely relied behind government efforts to fight the pandemic and to have collaborated joint effort. PM Modi called for the SAARC Nations Conference and proposed the creation of COVID-19 Emergency Fund, with India making an initial contribution of close to $10 million. The reason I started my address with this is because we have a Prime Minister right now who is leading from the front and is proactive and adaptive with the changing environment. As you are well aware, how the environment has changed, both socially and for business across the world. Prime Minister Modi gave us a clarion call when he talked about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India. Becoming Atmanirbhar or self-reliant does not mean going back to the Nehruvian era of closing our economy and import substitution. In fact, it means that India can be connected to the global supply chain in the same way it was, but will focus on making India a global hub of manufacturing and services, and our focus primarily will be on advancing our economy and making it an export hub. We need to adopt to the motto of vocal for local and vocal for global both, what Mr. Uday Shankar rightly touched upon. We need to produce locally and support the country's demand, and we need to export globally, which will help us to get into the virtuous cycle. The pandemic has altered the global supply chain in ways we would not have ever thought. We need to rebalance, reimagine, restart our activities by factoring in the new normal to achieve higher and accelerated growth that benefits all. All means the entire world, the entire globe, every nation. So no nation in the world has progressed without focusing on manufacturing and manufacturing-based exports, barring few countries which focus on oil or other similar commodities. Under the Atmanirbhar package, we identified certain sectors that will be highly affected and introduced various schemes to ensure that the businesses are not highly affected. Just 3 days ago, we announced measures close to 73,000 crore rupees to stimulate this consumer spending in the economy in an effort to fight the slowdown due to COVID-19 pandemic following lockdown. We have tried to fix the supply chain. Now we are pumping in to generate demand as well. So due to the pandemic, the government employees are unavailable to use their leave travel concession. So we have announced an LTC cash voucher scheme under which the government employees will be provided cash payment in lieu of the LTC during 2018 to 21, along with the leave encashments. It is expected that it will generate additional consumer demand of 28,000 crore rupees. A special festival advance scheme for non-gazetted employees as well as for the gazetted employees too is being revived as one-time measure to stimulate demand. All central government employees will get 10,000 rupees cash voucher to be spent during the festival season. It is expected that it will generate additional consumer demand of rupees 8,000 crore rupees. We understand the impact infrastructure has on the country's economy and how it has a multiplier effect. To boost the capital expenditure, the central government is issuing a special interest-free 50-year loan to the states to the tune of 12,000 crore rupees, especially for the capital expenditure. In a further boost to infrastructure creation, the government will make an enhancement budget provision of 25,000 crore rupees for roads, urban development, water supplies, infrastructure, etc. It has been even equipped that each state of India in the size of a country in a continent like Europe, we need to now harness the size and depth of our country's workforce and resources. Adopting the motto of vocal for local, each state can produce more and export more, thereby promoting competitive federalism. These measures will act as catalyst in reviving the economy, which has already begun seeing the green shoots. Speaking of green shoots, I would now like to emphasize on a bit on how the economy has started responding to the gradual unlocking. We saw a growth of 3.37% in the agriculture sector in the first quarter. We have seen our forex reserves jump up to a record of $545 billion US. The GST collections in the month of September stood at 95,480 crore rupees, which was much higher than the collection in the month of September and August 19. The e-way bills have hit a record high of 5.74 crore in the September this year, which is 9.3% more than those generated in the previous year. On 30th September 2020, almost 26.19 lakh e-way bills were generated, which is the highest ever count so far in a single day. So India's good exports posted at a 5.27% growth in the September 2020, which is on year-on-year basis to 27.4 billion US dollars, with crucial sectors such as ready-made garments, engineering goods, petroleum products, pharmaceuticals, and carpets are on upswing. India's manufacturing PMI for the month of September 2020 increased to 56.8 from 52 in August 2020, which is the highest since early 2012. So we have seen our forex reserve jump up to a record high of 545 billion US dollars. Our FDI inflows have not reduced. We have received inflow of 74 billion US dollars in the year 1920. The trend continues in this year despite the pandemic. Between April to July, India attracted almost 22 billion US dollars. In September, consumption of steel, toll collection, sale of tractors, passenger vehicles surpassed pre-COVID levels seen in the month of February. Spending on electricity, which is seen a good and reliable indicator, has also seen an increase. Car sales grew by 17% in August 2020, which signifies continuing, recovery of our demand in the small towns and rural markets. In July, the petroleum consumption recovered to almost 90% of the consumption seen in the same month last year. As I said, the tractor sales showed a month of sharp improvement, which is 39% in July, signaling strong demand from the rural economy. Furthermore, working in tandem with RBI, we have ensured that there is no supply side shortage, and now we are taking steps to boost the consumer demand in the upcoming festive season. While signs have been positive and optimistic, we still need to be cautious and need to work harder than ever before to come out of this pandemic in a better state. As Jyotsna ji is here as a leading hotelier, we have seen how it has impacted the tour, travel and tourism industry. But now the things are getting better. With the confidence getting back, the demand is increasing. I'm sure the travel and tourism sector will also see a better days. I would like to take the opportunity to talk about the progress what we have made under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. Under the emergency credit line guarantee scheme, though we have less time, I'll try to cut it short. The total amount sanctioned to the non-individual and individuals under the 100% emergency credit emergency line credit guarantee scheme stands at 1,86,000 crore rupees, of which I think close to 1,33,000 crore has already been disbursed to more than 2.7 million borrowers. To elevate the issue of liquidity of NBFCs, and the partial credit guarantee scheme 2.0 was introduced and extended, and banks have approved purchases of portfolio of 25,500 crore rupees and are currently in process of approval negotiations of few thousand crore rupees. CBDT issued refunds of more than 1,20,000 crore rupees to more than 34 lakh taxpayers between 1st April 2020 to 1st October 2020. Income tax refunds of 32,000 crore rupees issued to say about 31 lakh corporate and for the individuals, and for the corporate we have refunded close to 86,000 crore rupees in the last few months. So due date of all income tax return has also been extended for the benefit of corporate and the businessmen. Period of Vivad Se Vishwas scheme for making payments without additional amount will be extended again to 31st December 2020. The definition of MSME has been changed, which was a long-standing demand of the industry. The definition makes a lot of difference when it has increased to 250 crore rupees turnover. So in the last session of Parliament, we passed few bills which will further increase the ease of doing business for corporate across the nation. We have seen the ranking of India as far as the ease of doing business is concerned, going up from 142nd position to 63rd position. We passed the Companies Amendment Act 2020, wherein we have enabled direct listing of in foreign jurisdiction of companies. We have taken measures for decriminalization of the Companies Act 2013, especially in cases of defaults. We also passed the Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020, wherein this act now permits RBI to expand its regulatory control over cooperative banks in terms of management, capital, audit, and liquidation. This act also, this act was passed to avoid any banking frauds and crisis, thereby protecting safeguarding the money and the savings of the depositors. We also raised the minimum threshold to initiate the insolvency bankruptcy proceedings to rupees 1 crore from 1 lakh. So this clearly shows it will largely insulate the MSMEs and will suspend the provisions of the code for a year. The moratorium on the loans announced by the RBI also helped thousands of MSMEs. I will say this with confidence that the Modi government means business in a world where it is no longer business as usual. Our government has taken a slew of measures to strengthen the corporate governance framework, and I'm confident that under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, our economy will be revived. We will have a sustained growth and equitable development. In the latest IMF World Bank economic outlook, India is projected to grow at 8.8% in the financial year 2021, which will make us the fastest growing economy in the world once again. I would like to end with a small example of something beautiful that happened recently, which most of you would be aware. In Malviya Nagar, there is this small food joint called Baba Ka Dhaba, run by elderly couple who are suffering because of the pandemic. A video spread across the media, I'll say the social media, about this food joint. And by the next day, we saw something happen which ignited my hope in the spirit of India. Hundreds of commoners volunteered to visit this place and eat the homely food. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is a perfect example of being vocal for local. This just proves that if we come together and work in tandem to fight what's in front of us, there is no force which can stop us. With that, I will end my speech and thank you once again for inviting me to speak here on this platform. And I would like to thank all the speakers who have joined from various different areas across the world, from different time zones, from Colombia to Germany, from French to some other parts of the world. It's not an easy thing. Only FICCI can do it. And thank you once again, FICCI, for providing this platform. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you very much, Anurag ji, for so clearly articulating your thoughts. FICCI is extremely grateful to you for your support that you've always given us, particularly to the initiative of the
No,
Forum
it is
of
done all. Done, no?
Sorry. I don't know, some sort of a disconnect there, but I'll just repeat that FICCI is extremely grateful to you, Anurag ji, for your support that you've given us, and particularly to the FICCI initiative, a Forum of Parliamentarians. I recall very fondly our visit to Germany, the delegation that you had led, and over the years, we've had a very, very strong relationship with you, Anurag ji. Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now extremely pleased to invite Shri Suresh Prabhu, Honourable Member of Parliament and India's Sherpa to G20 and G7. Shri Suresh Prabhu is a well-known political figure in Indian politics with a global recognition. He is an ace administrator and has served as the former Union Cabinet Minister for Industry, Environment and Forest, Fertilizer and Chemicals, Power, Heavy Industry, and Public Enterprises. He was declared as the best member of parliament in 2004 and has been ranked as the second best performing minister. A very warm welcome to you, Sureshji, and we request you now to share your views on reimagining a global ecosystem.
So thank you very much. I really congratulate you for bringing many members of parliament from different geographies, different countries together on a common screen. I cannot say platform anymore, but to bring them together, and very interestingly, there are members of parliament from Latin America also here. There are members from Asia, members from other parts of the world. And just imagine that we live in different geographies, different locations, different countries, different nationalities, we speak different languages, we have different cultural backgrounds. But as members of parliament, our primary priority is the same. What is that? To make lives better of our constituents, our citizens, our communities, our people. And when we want to make the lives better, there are many dimensions to it. But one of the principal drivers for that is how can you make economic activity better so that they will become prosperous. The governments will, by increased economic activity, governments will have more money in the hand, which governments in turn can invest into infrastructure, into social sectors, and make lives of the people better, isn't it? That's what our job is as a members of parliament. But then the question is, how do you make that economy grow better so that all these things that I mentioned could happen? We as members of parliament in any part of the world have different social segments to take care of. On one side, there are providers of goods and services. There are people who work in manufacturing sector, in small and medium enterprise sector who produce something. There are people in service sector, like the chairperson of this forum, who runs a very successful hospitality business. She provides services. Then there are farmers who produce agriculture. So they are on one hand our own responsibility as members of parliament. Farmers, entrepreneurs, workers who work in the factories or work in the service, in the hospitality sector or hotel. There are people who work there in different roles, but they are the ones who are our responsibility. So service providers, workers, farmers are responsibility. But at the same time, we also have another responsibility. That is consumers. There overlap. Some consumers are also workers and workers are also, and the service provider are also consumers. So there overlap. But that is our responsibility as the consumers. Now we have to protect the interest of all of them together and make sure that economic activity increase. How do you do that? We have to create more jobs for them by creating more activity. How does more activity happens? First, we have to harness local resources so that they in turn can produce more, so more jobs will be created. But even if you produce more, you need customers. So when I was saying consumers, they want cheap products. They want better quality products. They don't care where it is produced, but they want it good, better, at a best possible price, value for money. So we have to take care of them by giving them something which they can enjoy in their own lives. And therefore, we must provide them access to markets so that they can buy what the best is for them. And they must have choice of deciding what they should buy. So that's one set of our responsibility. Other set is to produce more, which can be sold. Otherwise, who will produce? If you don't produce something, we keep producing and nobody's buying. Why will you produce? So we need markets. It is markets. We always feel have to be global markets. Because if we just start selling locally and we start only selling to the same set of people, after some time there is saturation. The demand won't rise because we are producing much more than what they can consume. And if you produce only limited quantity, how will you increase economic activity? Therefore, we must have an ability to produce more so that it can be sold more. And if you want to sell more, we need global market. Same way the even consumer feel that I must have access to global market because then I can pick and choose what's best for me. And nowadays, because of e-commerce, everybody can find out on the screen like what you're seeing today. On the screen itself will decide what is the best for you. Earlier, if you want to go and stay in Lalit Hotel, you have to know somebody in the Lalit Hotel. Nowadays, even if you are in Colombia, you can book a room in Lalit Hotel or a suite in Lalit Hotel, and she will upgrade you to a suite if you are a member of parliament, I'm sure, even if you book a hotel room. So you can do that by just pushing a small little button and book a room. So all this is now choice is available to you on the screen itself. And to do that, we must have therefore create local opportunities with global reach. If you don't have both at the same time, we are going to face a problem. Because if I keep producing wheat and rice and corn and different kinds of vegetables and fruits, which only limited quantity of people will eat for sure, but after some time they cannot eat more because it is produced more. So I must find a global market so that my farmers in India can get better price. And in fact, that's why as a commerce minister, I had prepared a first ever agro-export policy. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has this vision of giving farmers more income, doubling the farmers' income. But to do that, we need global markets. And when I provide global markets, that particular market is going to ask for access to my market. Because I will provide market otherwise. For example, if I tell all my possible customers that you can come and stay in hotels in India, but I will not give you any other facilities which in turn you expect from me, because you are helping me to sell my services, in turn you will expect something in return. So it's a give and take, and that's how it will happen. So what we need as members of parliament, we are local communities to answer to. So we must first and foremost take care of their interest. But after some time, when we start taking care of their interest, we'll realize that I can take care of their interest better by providing them even global access, global markets. That's what helps them to increase their income. And therefore, this is a big, important issue that we are facing today. That all issues are local. As we always say, politics is local. And therefore, local issues are very important. We have to address them. But to address local issues adequately and in a better manner, we must provide a global access to everybody. And that's what members of parliament challenge is going to be. How to ensure both at the same time? Make sure that we provide local opportunities by integrating into the global market. And that is what globalization has been, and we must work on that to create win-win situation. Some of the challenges of globalization was that we did not always created win-win. We had lose and win. So the losers obviously didn't want it to be part of this process, rightly so. And the winners wanted a bigger share of this smaller cake. That again is not doable. So we must therefore develop win-win situation. Multilateralism offers that opportunity to us. We must work on it. As members of parliament, all of us will realize, end of the day, as I was saying, language is different, culture different, nationality is different, but our challenges are the same. How to satisfy our voters, our constituents, and to do that, provide local opportunities. Local people must benefit, and for them to benefit, how to integrate it with global market without compromising on the interest of our own citizens. And that's what we must do. And that is what is going to create win-win situations. So let me congratulate you. I know there is a limited time for me to speak. I had to also go and have a bilateral call with the Japanese minister in the next few minutes as a part of her G20 negotiation. And I really welcome this very interesting initiative. And actually, one day, I will be able to explain to you at some other platform how, as 4-time member of parliament representing 2 million people, I have exactly been able to do this. We have created more than 100,000 women as self-employed. We have been able to offer local people, all rural areas, local people a job in big markets. And sometime now we are going to send our trained local people to global markets, to Japan, to Korea and others. And that is a new globalization should be. How, without losing jobs in your country, how can I create opportunities my people in my country? So both can benefit. If I send a nurse from India to Japan, I'm not displacing any job, but I am actually offering a whole care system which benefits them. Anybody to complain? In fact, we are offering a humanitarian service by earning livelihood for some others. It's the best possible solution. If I can make my farmer reach the other places, like Colombia makes coffee, Indian also make coffee. And we are discussing the PTA, Preferential Trade Agreement between Colombia and India. Without harming anybody's interest, how can you supplement it? How can you complement it? How can you make it better? By doing some value addition into this. And that's what is the new game of new globalization. So globalization must benefit all and should not create losers, but only winners. And that is what is a new challenge, and where only members of parliament can play that role. Because we know the pulse of the people, but we also have the ability to understand the global trends. And therefore, we need global platforms to bring all the members of parliament together on the common screen, hopefully one day on climate platform. And therefore, let's work together. Let me congratulate my friends who have made this program possible. Let me express my great happiness in joining hands with my great friends from different countries. In fact, I am one of the early participant in a new concept called e-parliament. It was called electronic parliament. We wanted to bring all the parliamentarians together. Then the name was changed to climate parliament. But e-parliament was a concept which was ahead of its time. My dear friend Nick Dunlop, who actually pioneered this idea, a New Zealander who lives in London, and we worked together by bringing so many countries together. I think the time has now come that we should talk to each other, understand each other's concerns, prioritize our own issues and work on that for creating better lives for our own constituents, our own citizens, and by making a world a better place. Because there are some issues which you cannot just deal locally, like climate change. We have to have a global action. We cannot deal with issues like terrorism only alone. We need global action. We cannot deal with issue of pandemic alone. We need global action. If we need global actions, obviously we need global connectivity. And if we need global connectivity, we can also bring it down to social issues, economic issues, and make a world a better place. Let's do that. Congratulations to you. Thanks to my dear friend Josna for chairing this important session. She is not a member of parliament. Her husband was a member of parliament, was a dear friend of mine. And therefore, I think she has 50% right to be speaking in the members of parliament forum. Not 100% yet, but 50%. Or being a woman, I can say 60%. Because I think she has so I all congratulate you. All the best to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sureshji, for sharing your views. Your presence is always inspirational. And we at FICCI are extremely grateful to you, sir. You have supported us always, and you have been the founding member of our Forum of Parliamentarians. So FICCI is truly grateful to you. Thank you ever so much for joining us, giving us your valuable time and your very, very inspirational insight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to invite my dear friend Vikram Chandra, who is going to take this session forward. And he's very capable of doing what he's going to do. So over to you, Vikram. Vikram, you're on mute. Vikram, unmute yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. I thought I had unmuted, but it went back on it. Okay. It's great to be here. Thank you all so much for having me on this. We've heard some really, really interesting comments already so far. We would now like to hear from some of the people who are joining us from across the world, from France, from Colombia, from Germany. And before I go across to all of you, we did have a statement that was made by Baroness Prasher from the British Parliament. She was unfortunately unable to be with us here in person, but she did send us this statement. So let's start off by listening to her, and then I'll come to each one of you. Let's hear opening comments from all of you, and then perhaps, depending on the time, we can have a sort of a freewheeling discussion to see how we can achieve win-win synergies of the sort that Mr. Prabhu was just talking about. So let's hear Right Honourable Baroness Prasher.
Today's subject is about multilateralism and the impact of COVID. As we all know that in the space of just few weeks, COVID-19 shut down one global economy and triggered the largest economic shock. Looking ahead, the most important factor that will shape our response is collective and enlightened leadership, excellence, adaptability, diversity, and sustainability. And that is the title of this conference. COVID-19 highlights the need to transform traditional supply chain models, and it has exposed the vulnerabilities of many organizations. It has radically changed demand for products and services in every sector, while exposing points of weakness and fragility in global supply chains and service networks. At the same time, it is striking how well and how fast many companies have adapted, achieving new levels of visibility, agility, productivity, and end-to-end customer connectivity, while also preserving their cash. The Future magazine reported 94% of the Fortune 1000 companies have been affected by COVID-19, with both upstream and downstream supply chain partners being disrupted. This demonstrates that many of the recognized supply chains' robustness and resilience strategies and mechanisms have been sufficiently effective to mitigate supply chain risks inflicted by COVID-19. The flaws within the existing supply chain strategies have been exposed to the extent that it is time for us to think outside the box for the new normal global business environment. Many supply chains have responded to this disruption by diversifying their product portfolio, making new products based on existing technology and knowledge. For example, India could achieve self-reliance in the production of personal protective equipment by apparel manufacturers. This calls for a company to have production facilities with local sources of supply in each of its major markets. In my view, countries that use the 3R, that is, to react, respond, and redesign, will emerge as supply chain leaders. An article published in the Harvard Business Review as early as in February 2020 had said that to ensure that there is no shortage of supplies, countries and businesses need to redesign to source locally. The UK too has, from time to time, redesigned its supply chain strategy to strengthen it. In 2015, the government published an action plan for itself and the industry. So to achieve self-reliance in supply chains, governments need to invest in innovation, skills, access to finance, building capabilities in small and medium-sized enterprises, and strengthening collaboration across supply chains. It is impossible to anticipate the arrival of global crises, such as coronavirus outbreak, but governments and businesses can mitigate their impacts by building resilience and building the capability to adjust and respond to these changes. Fortunately, new supply chain technologies are emerging that dramatically improve visibility across end-to-end supply chain and support companies' abilities to resist shocks. Transformation into digital supply networks enables visibility, collaboration, and agility. So leveraging advanced technologies will enable better response to future challenges. So the lesson is that we need to really be prepared for all kinds of eventualities in the future. And I hope that the lesson learned during the COVID will actually prevail. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that important message coming from Baroness Brashev. Now, if there's one thing that many people in India are increasingly starting to accept and realize, when you're talking about partnerships and strategic partnerships in particular, one of the countries that is seen as being an increasingly close strategic partner, and it's been building over the last few decades, is France. So clearly somebody who's doing an absolutely fantastic job with that is the president of the Indo-French Friendship Group, Celine Calvis. So I'm going to toss it across to you. This entire concept of partnerships, of building the relationship, of showing how countries can work together in a win-win manner. That's something that I think India and France are increasingly doing and recognizably so. So why don't I toss it across to you, and then let's hear your views.
Thank you, Vikram. Ladies and gentlemen, as Vikram said, I'm the president of the France-India Friendship Group of the French National Assembly since 2017, and I'm really pleased to participate to this FICI initiative with you today, which aim is to strengthen the dialogue between our countries, not only our two countries, France and India, but also with the other countries that are some representatives that are here around this virtual table. Our capacity to bring win-win synergies in a global world coping with crisis, not only one, not only the COVID-19, but multiple crises, is really at the core of our vision and work, how to do better. And I must say that the COVID-19 health crisis, which has led and still leads us to take some emergency measures, coping with difficult supply chain, logistical challenges, is also leading us to bring together energies, encourage new initiatives. We have seen some solidarity actions across the world to be put in place also. So we must say that despite this crisis, humanity has shown that we can do in another way. So I must say that this positive way of thinking, I want to make a statement about this, because otherwise we won't be able to bring together our countries and our people. And we must be aware that in this health crisis, we have shown that we can do in another way and together. But this is not this only crisis. As we thought, there is a huge challenges with climate changes. And we must realize that we should keep in mind these challenges. We are not able to leave it apart because of the health crisis. We must keep this challenge in mind. And in the face of this crisis, I believe what we can fear is turning isolationist, like coming back to only our countries, and that's really not the kind of way that France is thinking about our destiny. We cannot cut ourselves from the other country. When crisis hits us, unity is more essential than ever. And there are so many challenges facing us that we really have to reaffirm that we are thinking and really believing in multilateralism. This is at the core of our international policy. It has many times be reaffirmed by our President Emmanuel Macron. We often say that he is imagining a France in Europe, but also a France in the world. So we are not taking this way. Multilateralism is at the core of our strategy. And when we are reimagining Glocal ecosystem, it's the way for me to maybe underline two messages that I want to bring to you. The first one is like, you know, in France, we are dealing with the consequences of COVID-19, and the government set up a recovery plan. But you, India, can be a part of it. It's not only a recovery plan like only for people, for France, because this plan is also aiming enterprises in France to look for other activities in other countries. So my first message is to say that our recovery plan can be also yours. What are our priorities in this recovery plan? Is digital technology, but also sustainable development. And I am delighted that 7 billion of euros have been allocated to promote digital technology over the next 2 years. And precisely, India and France are an example of partnership on the digital subject. Indeed, globalization is not standing for stopping partnership. I would like to salute all the exchanges and strands of relationship between France and India already existing on digital. I think of companies like Capgemini in Mumbai. This company has succeeded in listening, adapting, developing, thanks to the digital skills of thousands of Indian engineers and other employees to offer digital solution to companies in many countries, not only our 2 countries. So this kind of partnership is surely to be encouraged and to be still encouraged by all countries. So digital is part of recovery plan, and as you are already in partnership with digital, I think that could be really something to follow. We believe also that the openness of France to the international market, both in terms of imports but also exports, is reaffirmed during in this recovery plan. I must point that 250 million euros are devoted to this, to help French companies in their prospecting efforts. So it's giving them financial support to still be capable to be in capacity to dialogue with worlds, and especially with countries that are friends. So India is part of this close friends in business. And we are really thinking that India is a country in which France want to continue to invest, because you are investing in your education system, in your human wealth system. And to do it that way, to continue to invest, to co-invest with you, we are also hoping that it will be easier. I mean, simplification. Even if there was a major improvement during our capacity of our two countries to bring to reality some major business opportunities, I think that should be really in top of mind to continue to encourage this partnership. So we are hoping that we will go forward to more simplification between our 2 countries. I know we are able to do that because we have shown this last years that major improvement have done that. So please help us, please help the French investors to gain some simplification, and we will be able to bring that. My second message, and you know, there is 2 messages, so that won't be long. But my second message is to make you aware of, even if there is this tendency leading us to say, okay, we want to localize everything back in our countries, we have to be more self-reliant. We also know that we cannot produce everything locally. It's not possible. We have to make some effort to do some improvement in that, but we also know that we can't do that. So we have to evolve collectively in finding which can be localized and which cannot be localized. And maybe beside globalization, I would add another idea of multi-localization, a new form of export and imports can be done, not only opposing one country to the rest of the world, but with the idea of multilateralism, we can also bring more idea of multi-localization. I think that this global strategy, adapting with local condition, is really to put forward. And as I said, we cannot produce everything locally. And I will take one example. Regarding climate change and our necessity to bring more sustainable energy to produce, example, electricity, I want to refer to our International Solar Alliance. With the sun, you cannot have the sun everywhere. In the intertropical belt, there is sun. But in my country, there is no sun. So we have also to consider that we have to help to produce energy where you have the resource, and the resource is in that country. And all the aim of this major alliance is to recognize that where you have the resource, you have to help people to extract this resource and to benefit from not only the country with the resource, but the world. Because as you are able in the intertropical countries to exploit all the sun and the solar energy, it's benefit for, with the planet and other countries. So we have to maybe reinvigorate this initiative of Alliance, and it also participate to keeping in mind that our climate change challenge not to be put aside, but I think we can have more and more economic partnership regarding that. So you can be aware and sure that Friends support will be here, and we know that we can also count on your support because we are really linked, and more every year passing by, we are really have a vision of multilateralism, even and especially on digital and sustainable development. So I think we have many things to do. So thanks for Vicky for giving us the occasion to discuss this possibilities and opportunities to bring more between our countries. Thank you very much.
Celine Calvis, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And yes, you're right. Simplification, I think, is something that Vicky itself has been asking for I don't know how many decades, and let's hope it happens. And you're right, you can't produce everything. It's really tough to compete with a really good Bordeaux, I have to tell you. So, yes, you can't produce everything. But obviously, India and France and other countries are starting to work very closely together. I'm glad there's just been news in the last 2-3 days of how France is also seeing itself as an Indian Ocean power, and there's a lot of cooperation there in reunion and others. So let's hope that that relationship continues to roll. Well, talking of the Indian Ocean, and let me now turn to another partner in the Quad, where again there's a lot of talk of increasingly close talk of cooperation and relationship, and that's of course Australia. Dave Sharma is joining us, Member of Parliament from the Australian Parliament, and Australia perhaps, Mr. Sharma, one of those countries that has in this year in particular seen the necessity and the requirement to maybe start diversifying its supply chains a little bit in lines of not just the pandemic, but also various political factors. So Dave Sharma, of course, Australian diplomat, did a lot of work in Papua New Guinea. He's been Australia's ambassador to Israel and has his own advisory business as well. So, Mr. Sharma, I'm going to throw it over to you, but Do you think Australia is finding the increasing need and requirement that let's try and have a more diversified relationship with a number of other countries? And it often always does help if you have partners in a country which do understand the crucial importance of what a googly is and why a city mid-on is different from a city mid-off. If that's not a silly point.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandra, and hello to my colleagues, and it's a real pleasure to join you tonight. Look, I think Australia is doing exactly what you've said, trying to diversify our relationships across the globe, and I think COVID-19, the pandemic, has only accelerated that. For us in Australia, we've been a modern independent nation for about 120 years now, but for most of our history, nearly all of our history, in fact, our largest trading partner and largest export market was also always our major strategic partner. So for the first, until the Second World War, really, that partner was the United Kingdom. It was our largest trading partner, Great Britain, and also our major strategic partner. And of course, the British Navy, the Royal Navy at the time, guaranteed our sea lanes of communication and trade routes. After the Second World War, our largest trading partner was the United States for a period, and then Japan, a United States ally. And of course, the United States and Japan, strategic partners of Australia. But in the last 15 years, we've encountered a situation now where our largest trading partner, which is China, is a comprehensive partner, as we describe it, but it's not a strategic partner, and it's a country with whom we have quite a few differences, obviously different political systems, different values, different cultures, and frankly, a different sense about how the world should work. So I think COVID-19 in particular has, I think, laid stark some of those risks for us in Australia, in having too great a dependence upon any one country, but particularly China. And I think we're diversifying as a result. I just step back a little bit and just outline, I think, 3 lessons that we have taken from the pandemic so far in Australia, which I think apply to the globe at large, and it's the geopolitical lessons that we are taking on. The first is that pandemics are disruptive. Now, that's probably an obvious point, but when we look back through history, global pandemics have often marked a turning point in the fortunes of nations. Athens was gripped by a plague in the second year of the Peloponnesian War, and never really recovered from that plague. In the second year, wiped out a large part of their population and army. The plague of Justinian in the Eastern Roman Empire, in the sort of late Roman period, of course, crippled the Eastern Roman Empire and gave rise and space really for political Islam to emerge as a force from the Arabian Peninsula. And then even in the Middle Ages, the Black Death really spelled the end of feudalism, because it wiped out large parts of the labour market, weakened the control of landowners, and allowed organised labour to organise and demand greater conditions. So I think this pandemic, we should expect, will be equally disruptive. We have on our side this time much better health systems, of course, more sophisticated information, much better science, which means we're better able to understand and combat the effects of the pandemic. But on the other side of that, we're a much more integrated, we're now a single global economy and a single global geopolitical system, which means a shock in one part reverberates from the other. I think the other thing we've noticed in Australia is that undoubtedly we have now passed the high water mark of globalization. We think inevitably that is now in some retreat. I think the challenge for a nation like ours, which still prefers an open world order and still will always rely heavily upon the free movement of goods and people for its prosperity and its security, is the challenge for us is to limit that retreat. And I think the key watchwords for us, or the things we would want to promote out of this, are concepts like resilience and diversification. So nations building, onshoring some key capabilities, perhaps having strategic stockpiles of some key supplies, be they medical goods or fuel, but also diversifying the sources of these. So not the things we want to avoid, I guess, are things like a move towards autarky or strict self-reliance and protectionism, because we generally believe that the period of expanding global trade has been not only good for Australia, but good for the world and good for the world's peoples. But I think that is a challenge, because the pendulum is now undoubtedly swinging back and towards protectionism and as a result, isolationism, I think. And the last point I think to make here is that there will definitely be winners and losers from this as nations. Now, we don't really know, it's a little too early to say exactly who they are, but I think you could say that those nations that emerge from this crisis most quickly, those nations that emerge from this with their economies least impacted or most intact, and importantly, I think those nations that emerge from this where the public has kept faith in their government and their institutions and their systems will obviously be the strongest. And the corollary, of course, is that those nations which emerge from this crisis more slowly, perhaps are gripped by a second wave or even a third wave, those that take a bigger economic hit, which will be much harder to overcome, and those where public faith in the system of governance has been eroded and institutions, they're going to have a much harder time in coming back. And I think it's too early to make judgments, but in Australia in particular, I think we're worried about some of our very trusted partners and long-standing partners because of the way they've managed through this pandemic so far. You know, foremost amongst those being candid is the United States and the United Kingdom, which have been, you know, pillars of the post-war order and nations that we think have helped underpin global security and prosperity. So this is why I think we're casting a field, strengthening our relationship with partners like India, with Japan, with France and Germany as well, because we think these nations which have managed so far this crisis relatively well will be in a position to help buttress the global system when some of the normal pillars of support are going to be preoccupied with their own domestic challenges.
Right, Mr. Sharma, that's really interesting. And what you said about we might have passed the high point of globalization, that's an interesting point which I want to touch upon, because there's another theory that we've also reached the high point of the high watermark of liberalism and democracy and the free order, because among the other countries that will say, well, we dealt with it really well, we only had 85,000 cases. Whether you believe the statistics or not, would be a country like China, which is not necessarily a paragon of democracy or liberty or any such thing. So that's an interesting point. But I want to now go across to Christian Herté, because you know what you said, which countries have handled this effectively and handled it well. If you were to do a poll, I think very high on the list of the countries that have probably handled the coronavirus crisis the best globally would be Germany. So, Mr. Herté, let me toss it across to you, get your overall thoughts on where you see the world, and also perhaps for the rest of us, some sort of indications as to what Germany was able to do, because you seem to have done a really good job in the things that Mr. Sharma was just talking about. So you're on mute. You might want to just unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks. Hello, Vikram, and hello to all. First, thanks for invitation and the initiative to organize this platform and this discussion. And indeed, if you look to Germany, I think we can say that we did quite well within the last months about the COVID-19 pandemic situation. If you look about the people who got ill in Germany comparing to other countries, at the country who is very strong connected on economic issues, on traveling and all of this with other countries, you see that our situation in Germany is quite well. I think we handled the situation with the pandemic quite well, because we told our people what to do and what not to do. But I have to admit that it's not easy to tell the people what to do not, because it's always a problem to bring the people to understand what is necessary, and you have to explain a lot. And I think the same situation you have with the problems with multilateral order in the different interests of nations, of countries, and our whole global world. Like Suresh Prabhu told in the beginning, you always have to see what is the interest of the people in your country, what is the interest of your voters. But your voters are, well, quite heterogeneous. They are not only maybe workers, but they are also consumers. And if you see what happened within the last decades, you can see a permanent rising international trade. And Germany, as well, a middle power, was a major beneficiary of this development within the last decades. But at the moment, you see a contrary development. Lots of people say we are in a strong crisis of the multilateral order, and some phrases are still said by my colleagues from all over the world. China was a topic. If you see the rising tensions between the big powers, if you see what happened within the last years, on my personal point of view, the COVID-19 pandemic is only a catalyst for a lot of other developments within the last years. So if you see what is happening on a global political point, if you see what is happening under the situation of climate politics, of SDGs, you see that the interest of the economy of nations is maybe not the same than the interests of the people within the country. So yes, we had rising standards all over the world within the last decades. We had the situation that the people got wealthier all over the world within the last decades, but not everyone participated in the same manner. So if you look for Germany, for instance, we were a very, very big beneficiary of the situation of the last years, with our possibility for machinery, for our power in trade, with the possibility of buy cheap products and assemble them in Germany. We had very, very rising standards and wages. But we had lots of people who did not participate in this development because they maybe worked in the heavy industries, who had a decline within the last decades. And I think we have this situation actually in every country. So let's say in the US, where lots of people in the middle of the country are quite angry about the politics, and you see it in elections in the US, and probably will see it again within a couple of days on the 3rd of November in the US, that you have very, very heterogeneous election results in the US between the West and the North, and the West and the East, and in the middle of the US. And what is our job as politicians is to organize the benefit of multilateralism and of trade, of free trade within the world. And I think it is true today as 250 years ago, as Adam Smith wrote his famous book, Wealth of Nations. We have benefits of shared work, of the possibilities of different countries and places. But on the other hand, it's our job to organize that the benefits are not only a global and abstract benefit, but also a benefit for most of the people. So if you look, for instance, for India and see your agricultural sector, it's huge comparing to most of the other countries. And there is huge potential. But on the other hand, it's not only huge, it's also in a situation where products can't be produced on the same price level as very, very big companies can do, let's say in Australia, even in Germany, or in the US. And our job is to organize value chains locally to help the people in the regions to do what can be done in the regions. Let's say for the Indian agriculture to put more value-added chains in your country and to make sure that you get out the possibilities of let's say your agricultural sector. And on the other hand, like Celine told us, it is not possible to produce everything everywhere on the same quality and on the same price. We need collaboration and we need free trade. And I think our job is to support multilateralism. On the other hand, I think Dave Sharma is not wrong when he said that we are in a situation where free trade, where multilateralism is at stake, and we don't know how it will develop within the next years. And we should not only see our national interests, but also the whole interests of the world, because in the end, we all will participate in the development of the whole world if we push this together forward. So maybe this only these few points from me, and I'm glad that you organized this platform. It's only my pleasure to be in contact with my Indian friends. My last travel abroad was to India in the end of February before the shutdown came. So I'm happy to see some of you again here. Thanks.
Great, Mr. Hurted, great hearing from you, and some interesting points that we will touch upon. Let me now go across to His Excellency Juan Carlos Lozada, who's a member of Parliament in Colombia. Colombia, obviously, and South America in general. South America, one of those countries that's been really affected by coronavirus, and I'm not quite sure whether it's showing any signs of getting better. Now, of course, you've been a member of Parliament, led multiple humanitarian service projects. Also, yoga and meditation, I see, has been something that's been important to you, which is always interesting to hear. Let me get your perspectives from Colombia and also from the point of view of South America and other areas which have been hit by the pandemic in quite a serious manner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandra. For me, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's a real honor to be in such high level panel here. So yes, from the morning in Colombia, it's very early here. I would like to start by saying that reimagination of the world for us in Colombia, it's something that we have to be doing for quite a while now. As you know, my country has been in a war for more than 60 years with a huge humanitarian crisis for many decades. And just 4 years ago, we were able to sign a peace agreement with the guerrillas of the FARC. And of course, that has reshaped not only our democracy, but also our whole vision of the world and also our economy somehow. So this COVID-19 crisis comes at a time where our country has to reimagine itself and of course rethink most of the things we've done for the last decades. So for us, it's not only reimagining the world after COVID-19, but for us is reimagining the world after war, which killed way more people than what COVID-19 has done. Of course, COVID-19 is a very big challenge for a nation who is rebuilding itself. And of course, a nation that is divided on how to go forward. As you all know, inside Colombia, there's a huge controversy on the peace agreement and how it should be implemented. And of course, COVID-19 comes at a time where this crisis is undergoing, but at the same time, COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to unite around rebuilding our society. And I think that from all perspectives, this crisis can come along with very big opportunities, of course. And I think the peace process in Colombia is a very good example on how a local issue, a local challenge can be overcome not only by locals, but also with the help of other nations and international cooperation. Our peace agreement was agreed on in Cuba with the help of Chile, Venezuela, Norway, and other countries of the world. Today, the financing of all the social projects we need to do to ensure peace are lots of them funded by international cooperation, such as, for instance, Germany and Norway. So, of course, it would be absolutely impossible to come to an agreement without international cooperation, even with Indian help. As you know, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, for example, was one of the very important moderators or negotiators of this peace agreement. So it's absolutely impossible today to think about tackling the big issues in a worldwide perspective, but also in local perspective, without cooperation and multilateral interventions. So I think what we need to do with COVID-19 is exactly that. We need to understand that in a place like Latin America, where, as you mentioned, COVID-19 has a big spread, and we have very big issues with it, not only on the health point of view, but also in the economic grounds, where, well, Colombia had one of the largest lockdowns, and of course that has a huge impact in our economy. Of course, Colombia is one of the more stable economies of the region, so we're expected to grow at 5% next year. We're going to have to gain back the jobs that were lost during this 2020. But I think our economy is strong enough to be able to overcome this crisis. And I'm sure that the region is going to be able to do the same as Brazil, for example, who has a very big hit from COVID-19. And I think that Latin America has a very big, especially South America, has a very big role to play in this international reimagination of the shape of our world, because it is actually in our ground where the biggest crisis that humanity lives today, which is the climate crisis, is played on. We have the Amazon River, which has the Amazon bioma, which holds the biggest percentage of the biodiversity of this world. And if we are not able to tackle deforestation now in Latin America, is the world who is going to suffer. Of course, deforestation is absolutely linked to the violences of Brazil and Colombia, in which, as maybe you saw the last report of Global Witness, to being an environmental activist is the most dangerous of all activities you can make. Brazil and Colombia are the first two countries where being an environmental activist is more dangerous in the whole world. And of course, this is not going to be, we're not going to be able to tackle climate crisis in the land, the most important part of the world for it, without cooperation of other nations. In that sense, we have to start talking about the responsibility of other parts in the world in the loss of the Amazon forest, especially in Europe, for example, where last studies show that 20% of the deforestation of Latin America, especially Brazil and Colombia, which are the two first countries in deforestation in the world, are directly linked to some kind of consumption of products in the UE. So it's absolutely impossible to speak about climate crisis today without talking about the relationships of international commerce that are actually at the root base of the deforestation in Latin America, especially in Brazil and Colombia. So, of course, only through multinational cooperation and the acknowledgement of the responsibility we all have around in local issues as we do in Latin America, we're going to be able to tackle these challenges. Same thing, for instance, dear Vikram Chandra, with the problem of drug trade. Colombia is at the center of the world's drug trade, and it will be absolutely impossible to fight this other pandemic that has caused the lives of many people in my country without international cooperation and coming to an agreement on how we should change the focus of the war on drugs and maybe start regularizing it instead of politics of prohibition. And this, I think, we're going to have to talk about, especially with the United States, but the models that have been created in Europe, for instance, in Holland, are the models that the world should start following now on this issue that is huge for our country and that is huge for the world. So, of course, only through thinking our local problems in a worldwide vision and getting the help of our allies around the world to tackle these local issues will be the only way to solve the multiple crises, as Madame Calvis mentioned it. Only through this cooperation we're going to be able to look forward to a world free of violence, to a world where prosperity can be shared by all nations, and where global crises as the COVID-19 can be faced altogether by everyone.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I can see that we are more or less out of time. And, you know, one of the things that I think the pandemic has taught all of us is that when the time ticks over, everyone stops. You know, even in India, there used to be a time when you used to come for meetings 10 minutes, 15 minutes late. Now you say you got to stick on time, which is one of the aspects of this. But just to put some of the strings together, I think the entire question of what Dave Sharma was saying about the fact that sometimes pandemics can be major turning points. Are we seeing a turning point? In which direction is the world going in? I think that's an interesting question, because we did hear from Suresh Prabhu a little earlier saying that it's always good to have win-win and not lose-lose. But which is the direction that the world is going to go in right now? Are we going to see a return to what was once considered, maybe that's the way the world is going to go? There is going to be more and more globalization, more and more countries coming together to do the right things, more and more Paris Accords where we can solve the big problems of the world, more and more, democracy is rising, concern about human rights, freedom is going to spread more and more peace in countries across the world. That's what people thought was going to happen, and let's hope we do return to that. But there is, of course, a risk that now and after the pandemic in particular, and if this is a turning point, and if economies continue to suffer, will you see more protectionism? Will you see more my country's interest before the others, more beggar my neighbor policies, a rise of authoritarianism, more populism, a lot less liberalism? I don't think we know completely the answer in which the world is going to go. Let's hope it's the right direction. I perhaps can say something maybe many of you would not, that maybe some of the answers will also be thrown up when we know the results of a certain election that is not that far away, a few weeks from now. Maybe some more hints will come as to whether it's going to be a bit more isolationism and my country first, or is it going to be a bit more about internationalism and let the whole world prosper and let's have more win-win. So we'll wait to get the answer to that. But I think all the perspectives we heard today were really, really great. And frankly, it's in all of your hands as leading parliamentarians to try and drive the right decisions and move the world to the right direction. Thank you all so much. Back to you, Dr. Suri.
What a fantastic session. We got insights from all over the world about the multifaceted dimensions of globalization and glocalization, actually, and multilateralism. Deepest gratitude to all our panelists for giving us their time and extremely valuable thoughts. A very special thanks to our moderator, Vikram Chandra, for smoothly navigating us through this session. But most importantly, a huge thank you to all of you who've logged in for this FICCI initiative. And we hope that you will continue to be a part of this FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay well. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Suri. While we formally end this session, so those of you who have to go for other meetings and are not really interested to be part of the cultural program that follows, you're free to do so. But we actually go to the grand finale of the Leeds 2020. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people around the world. Mr. Uday Shankar, President-elect FICCI, colleagues from industry, friends from the media, distinguished speakers and eminent guests. We come to the end of 4 days. World leaders, including many of you in the last session, have been deliberating on the current pandemic,